Morning. The special meeting of the Bellflower City Council is called to order on Thursday, January 28, 2021 at 10 a.m. Before we begin, please note that all public meetings will be recorded. When a participant logs in via their computer or calls in to join the meeting, their name and or phone number will be visible to all participants. Unless you're providing public comment, your audio will be muted and your video will be disabled. Persons wishing to be audience members to the meeting may do so anonymously. Anonymous participants, however, will not be recognized for public comment. Persons who seek to bypass the city's host controls will be dropped and blocked from the meeting. Thank you for your cooperation. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Sanchez,
Present.
Councilmember Santinas,
Here?
Mayor Pro Tem Dutton, Councilmember Hamada,
Here.
Mayor Coops,
Is there a motion to excuse the absence of Mayor Coops and Mayor Pro Tem Dunn?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Councilmember Hamada, seconded by Councilmember Sanchez. Roll call, please.
You did. You completed.
I wanted to note that the mayor and the Mayor Pro Tem had conflicts due to property interest. So that is the reason for their absence this morning.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
No, we completed study. Next up is public comments. I think we're good.
Well,
We've already done the roll call and the motion and the reasons for the absences. So.
Well, but there was a motion, so well.
Oh, I'm
let me do
sorry.
this.
Okay, you're
Without
right.
objection, that will be the order.
Yeah,
How's
you
that?
know what? I misread you. You're correct. If you want to do a roll call for the excusal, you can do that if you want.
No, I already said that without objection, that will be the order. I think that
Okay.
will be sufficient.
All right.
Thank you, Sunny.
All right, public comments, Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, this is pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3A. The public may address the city council on matters listed on the agenda. Those wishing to speak on an agenda item must utilize one of the methods listed on page 2 of the agenda. You'll be given 3 minutes to address the city council. Attempts to provide comment at times not designated on the agenda may result in the city dropping you from the meeting.
Before we do that, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature. If by computer, it appears under the participant tab. If by phone app, it will appear under the more button at the bottom right-hand corner. Or if by telephone, please *9 to raise your hand. You'll be called upon in the order received. You can then unmute your microphone so that you can provide your comments. Do we have any public comments this morning?
I'll give the public just a moment to utilize the feature.
All right, thank you, Madam Deputy City Clerk.
I'm not seeing any public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. With that, moving on to item 4A, Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, we get to that side. So this is entitled Consideration of Possible Action to Explore Allowing Small Scale and Artisanal Manufacturing in the Downtown along Bellflower Boulevard between Flora Vista and Cedar Street. We have with us today from the Washington, D.C. area, Miss Alana Pruce. And by way of introduction, the way we became connected was I had just joined LinkedIn and was messing around with it. And Ms. Pruce reached out and said, hey, been looking into your downtown. I work with a company that might be able to help you out. And this is kind of what we do. And I looked a little bit into the company and I said, hey, this is interesting. So I asked Mr. DeLonga to reach out to Ms. Pruce. And then we struck up a relationship that looked like it's going to be a good working relationship. And thus far, we've found that relation to be productive and some innovative thoughts coming forward. Today, the goal is to introduce the community and the city council into the kinds of things and concepts we've been working with to date and to try to get some direction to go forward at this. I think this has a lot of potential. I think it adds another wrinkle to the development of downtown. that we had never anticipated, but it could be useful. And I think it achieves the council's goals of increasing employment and attractions in the downtown area. So with that, I'm going to introduce Jim Del Longa, and Ms. Pruce is on the line with us. And Jim, I'll let you go ahead and lead off, and then you guys can switch off and do whatever you need to do on this.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Again, Jeff really did a great job of introducing the project. We've already done some work towards the end, which Alana will go into in her presentation. She'll be doing an intro of what this is and then seeking some feedback from council. So Alana, I'll turn it over to you. Do you want the screen share done at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
First, I just wanted to, I have the power to do that, so I can turn that on.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Then,
I didn't lose that power. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to join you today. Thank you to the city leadership for participating in this today. As was introduced, my name is Ilana Pruce, and I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Recast City. And what I'm going to do is take you through a short slideshow presentation where I'm going to explain to you what we're talking about when we talk about small-scale manufacturing and what it can do for downtown Bellflower. But then also open it up, as Mr. Stewart said, to a conversation where I'm going to really ask for your thoughts about what is the potential, what could we see happen, and I'll explain a little bit about how we'll be continuing to go about this work with the city. So, sharing my screen, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about what we're talking about. So my background is in city planning and community development and economic development. And when I look at a place, particularly at a downtown, to me, all of those pieces come together in a place. So it is about a strong economy, it's about a strong place. And for me, small scale manufacturing, which I will define for you, all gets wrapped up in how we get there. I'm just going to anchor us a little bit in this reality that I know you do not need to be reminded of, but I feel I would be remiss if I did not anchor us there. And that is the pandemic that we are squarely in the middle of. Who knew that we would still be in this almost nearly a year later from when we first found out about these pieces, and the impact of this pandemic on our small business community, and all that happened as things were closed in the spring of last year, as things have been closed more recently. And what that means is that we are in a really tough place, and we were actually in a tough place before all of this hit. Our COVID reality was that most small businesses closed for an extended period of time, and that over 40 million people filed for unemployment last year. We also know that right now, the number of Black and Brown people who are unemployed is more than double that of our white population. So that even though jobs are coming back in some places, the impact is different in different populations. But even before COVID hit, we were having major issues in our economy that were sort of under the line of what most people were paying attention to. If we look nationally, 80% of all of our counties, we're seeing a decline in the working age adult population. That means that a lot of places we're witnessing brain drain, loss of population, and we're already struggling from an economic perspective. Nationally, we also witnessed the highest income inequality our country has ever recorded. And that's a major issue, especially when we're looking at wealth creation of our Black households versus our white households. The wealth creation gap between those is 6.5 times. And that's almost unchanged in the last 50 years. So the things that we were doing in the past aren't really effective enough. We also know that when we have vacant properties within a community that stand vacant for a long time, it impacts the value, the property values nearby, and depress those values very significantly. And what all of this means, and we can talk more about sort of previous economic impacts, but all of this means is that there's really an incredibly strong need right now to both save small businesses in our communities and use the solutions as a way to create more vibrant downtowns. We can build and we can rebuild in a way that builds a stronger, more inclusive local economy. And just to give you 2 cents about me, on the left is me in my teenage years. when I had both curls and short hair, but in a dress that my mother sewed for me. My mother quilted and sewed and cooked and was one of those people who made stuff. And that's part of my roots of loving small scale manufacturing. On the right is when I had the opportunity to give a TEDx talk now many years ago, all about the economic power of great places. My career, the decades of my career really sit squarely in how do we bring energy back to downtowns? How do we bring energy back to neighborhood mean streets in a way that helps the community who is there now? My other projects are these two growing teams. These are in fact old pictures at this point, but that I also love teaching how to use the tools and grow. With Recast City, I took everything that I learned out of housing and transportation and downtown redevelopment and the real estate around that and looked at it through this lens of small scale manufacturing. And small scale manufacturing is any business that creates a tangible good that you can replicate or package. We'll talk more about them in a second. But it's all about finding these businesses in communities, bringing people together, and really understanding how we can not only build up our small business community, but do it in a way that creates more energized, vibrant locations. Usually that means sitting down at a table with you, but for now, it will still be on Zoom, but hopefully not for too much longer. The problem is that we've been working off of this old default economic model that's really left over from many decades ago. And our old models are leaving a lot of people and a lot of places behind. And we sort of crowned a few places as economic winners. And we focus on reinvesting in those places and reinvesting in those businesses much more so than finding new businesses to invest in and new places to invest in. We also have this wonky thing in real estate where once we figured out how to build one thing, the development community builds that one thing. So it was single family houses in the middle of nowhere for a very long time. Now sometimes it's mixed use with retail on the ground floor, regardless of whether or not there's more retail demand in that community. So we have, in many cases, too much retail. We have vacancies growing because of COVID. And we have a completely changing retail environment because of all of the e-commerce changes that were happening even before COVID hit. And so when we look at how are we creating vibrant downtowns, we have to take all of those pieces into account so that we can do so successfully. The focus that I work on is really about how do we create this new path forward? How do we do it differently? And we do it differently by focusing on these four factors. We invest in the people who live there now, who has businesses, who have talents, how do we build up capacity in that business community? We invest in the place with those people. How are we creating places within our community that our small businesses can afford? This becomes really essential in the thinking, especially with your new train station coming in. How are we creating space that local businesses can afford even when new construction is going in? New construction is very expensive. Most of the time, local business owners can't afford that ground floor space. What are we doing now to reverse engineer so that we know that local businesses can afford that in the end? We also need to create a new structure to support and scale these investments, both in the community, but also in the small businesses. Small businesses, any kind of business, need business development support, and there's a method behind that madness. And then on top of that, we also need to think long-term, but act now. Long-term master plans are essential, especially when you have a huge infrastructure investment coming in, but there are hundreds and hundreds of small steps to take now, to act on now, to make sure that we're building in a way that is inclusive, that is resilient, and that achieves those long-term goals that you have for the community. Small-scale manufacturing is one way to get there. I could talk about them as a missing piece for this new path. And so, as I said before, these are businesses that produce some kind of tangible product that you can replicate or package. My shorthand for that is a hot sauce, handbags, or hardware. It is material agnostic, it is high tech, it is artisan, and everything in between, but they are phenomenal neighbors. And they are really energizing for storefronts and for community members to be able to see their own businesses out front. There's a number of benefits that they provide to our community. These businesses give us a reason to gather. I know we can't do festivals like this quite yet, but we will be back at them again someday. When we have booths at these festivals, when we have vendors at these festivals, and people can come see something that was made in their community, there's so much community pride. And it brings people out from the community itself, but also from the broader region to see these things being made. So small scale manufacturers give us this reason to gather. They also allow us to build more inclusive business communities. Small scale manufacturers are in every single part of our population across race, ethnicity, immigrant status, income. There are people who make stuff across every part of our community. And so when we make a dedication at the beginning to say, I want to make sure that we are bringing in business owners that do represent our diversity, we then can make sure that the solutions that we're offering for barriers to growth for this business community, be that business development programming or real estate or something else, addresses the barriers that are specific to different populations, and we can really build up a more inclusive business community with this sector. Additionally, the sector is phenomenal at filling storefronts. This woman, as you can see, is a soap. She sells soaps, but off to the left of this picture was a huge cauldron, so that when times were slow in the store with customers coming in, she could mix a new pot. It was like a big witch's brew of her soaps, pour it into the mold, and she could do her production and her retail in the same space. That means she doesn't have to pay for multiple spaces. She doesn't have to pay for multiple staff having to work at different locations. And she can be this energizing presence along this street so that people can look in the window and see things being made, which is really an amenity that draws people out. So small scale manufacturers, especially consumer products, are really, really wonderful to fill storefronts. When we fill these storefronts, we also increase property values. And this is an example of a coffee roaster company. The front of it is a coffee shop. You walk in, you order your cup of coffee, you can take your little bag of coffee and leave. The back half of this shop is a large coffee roasting machine, so that the business also roasts for their wholesale in the same space and ships that out to the region out their back door. So this business has storefront foot traffic, it has wholesale distribution at their back door, and it can do all of this in one shared space. So that becomes a really efficient use of space for this business, but it also energizes this block of the street by bringing this dynamic use in, and then it helps increase the property values because more and more businesses then filled other vacant properties along the street because all of a sudden there were people walking through here and using this area of the city. And also, when we find ways to support our small scale manufacturers, we also attract other business owners and entrepreneurs to our community. The more that we are very public about how we are supporting our business community, how we are supporting business owners, especially the small businesses and the producers, word gets out, and you attract by that spreading of the word across entrepreneurs that this is a place to be. Knoxville, Tennessee has done a phenomenal job trying to become the maker city. They actually have the website, The Maker City. And they, before COVID, were doing annual maker summits. They have an entrepreneurship program through their Knoxville Entrepreneur Center that supports this sector. They have an online directory that they created of this business sector. And they've worked really hard to create programming and support for this sector as well as space for it. And so word got out. And now Knoxville is known on the East Coast as really a place to consider moving to if you want to grow your product business. So all of these things are aspects of what it means to create a thriving place, as I'm sure you know, but I want to be a little bit more specific about who these businesses are. One of the hardest thing I think for people to get sort of grasp is let's get really specific about the kinds of businesses so we understand what we're looking for and who we want to bring into the community. So I'll go from small to large. First, we have artisan businesses. These are people you might be familiar with because they might originally be vendors at a pop-up market, but ultimately they can move into spaces. They often really love micro retail spaces to start in. This business was in a 400 square foot space and then moved to a 700 square foot space. They can do the sewing, the textile production in that same space and have a retail front. It's very cost effective to have that kind of micro space as an artisan business. It also is a phenomenal way to liven up a street. Most property owners are not particularly interested in creating micro spaces out of one big space because then they have to really manage all of these other spaces. So they sometimes look for a master tenant, a master lease, but some folks are happy to get some sort of development trade-off to create these kinds of spaces and new development. This is actually a property and a new development in DC. The development is called Monroe Street Market. And these are artisan shops that are on a walkway. It's not main retail on the main street front. It's a pedestrian walkway that goes through the property where these businesses are. And then we have businesses that are prototyping some kind of high tech, some kind of advanced manufacturing product, or they're doing small batch production. These are businesses that might be making 500 of something instead of 5 of something. They might even be making 1,000 of something, but in the world of manufacturing, that's still a very small batch of something. Or they might be making 10 of something, and they're growing. So these are people who are making things that are for the supply chain as well. They might be doing additive manufacturing for something in the defense industry. It may mean that you don't want them as a storefront, but it could mean that they are a phenomenal part of your local economy. All of these businesses are potentially now going from 5 employees to 20 employees. These are good paying jobs. Their jobs are paying 50 to 100% more on average than a retailer or service job. So when we're looking at how do we help our community members build wealth, we are looking at ways for them to become both business owners and business employees in this sector as well. We then have businesses that are scaling even larger. They might be 20 or 30 employees. If it's a really big space like this one, it might have even 50 employees. It's all about the businesses fitting into the fabric of the neighborhood. So thinking about the buildings that are in downtown now, or the buildings that could be coming in with the new transit station coming in the future. This is a brewery in Cincinnati. They bought an old brewery building in Cincinnati in the old brewery district. Makes a lot of sense. Building's 120,000 square feet. It's a big building, but one of the things that they did is they limited their brewing production space to maybe 1/3 of the floor space, and they left the rest of it to be a community gathering place. We can't do this right now because of COVID, but we will get back to it. A lot of what we found in the retail and inside before COVID hit was experiential retail. People want to come together. People want to gather in places. And once it's safe again, people will want to do that again. And so we end up having storefronts or buildings where it's not just retail, it's not just production, it is also community gathering, it's also event space. And so our old zoning that was one thing or another no longer really works. And we have to create this flexibility of how space gets used because people are looking to be included. They're looking for places to gather and they're looking to be a part of something. We then have different kinds of shared spaces. The one that some people are most familiar with is called a makerspace. A makerspace is a very specific product. Think of it as a gym, but with tools. This is where you can join as a member or you can pay to take a class and you get trained on and have access to a set of tools. CNC routers, 3D printing is often very popular. Sometimes it's industrial sewing machines, wood shops, welding shops. They can have all different kinds of tools or be smaller. These have popped up around the country, or often most successful as nonprofits or associated with the public school system or the public library system. They're very expensive to run because of the cost of the tools. And so they're usually most successful in this kind of setup. They're wonderful for educational purposes. Makerspaces often are mission driven with a purpose to educate youth. Some of them have workforce development programming that take place in there, and some of them have small business development and entrepreneurship programming. But the focus is really on education and community outreach more than anything else. We then have shared spaces specific to one vertical within small businesses. So a shared commercial kitchen is one kind that's probably what people are most familiar with. A commercial shared kitchen is where a small business that works in the food sector can come in and pay a fee either to have a dedicated kitchen space all day or for a set number of hours. And so it's a lower cost than having to outfit your own commercial kitchen with the health stamp of improved health stamp from the start. This means you can come in, you can pay for a few hours, you might even get some mentorship out of it as well. Commercial shared kitchens, shared wood shops, even shared advanced manufacturing spaces. We're seeing a number of different verticals pop up with these shared spaces, but they are not open to the public. They are specific to the sector of within that small business sector. So what do we do with all of this, right? We work with communities to bring small scale manufacturing businesses into economic and real estate development projects to create these thriving places. As I said before, one of the wonderful things about small scale manufacturing is that they work on Main Street, they work in downtown, they bring another kind of use to our storefronts that really does create middle income jobs, creates wealth building opportunities for our residents, and really enlivens our storefronts in a new way. And so for me, it really all comes down to saving downtowns, rebuilding our downtowns, creating a reason for people to come together in our downtowns with small scale manufacturing. There are a couple of things that we really do get out of this in terms of the how we get there. The first challenge always is finding small scale manufacturing businesses. There are a lot of them anywhere I have ever worked, from big cities with hundreds of thousands of people to small towns of 5,000 people. There are people who make stuff everywhere. That is never the challenge. One of the things that we look at is how do we best support this sector, especially looking at businesses that are bringing in a variety of revenue sources. When a business can both earn revenue off of people walking in the door, people buying things online, and selling things wholesale within the region, they are going to be much more resilient to anything going on in any one of those pieces. So we're looking at that kind of nimbleness of business. We also look at how do we fill in gaps in business development support. We know that an entrepreneurial ecosystem is strongest when it actually has a lot of business development support and real estate spaces for those businesses. It's that combination of the puzzle that makes a big difference. But in a lot of communities, there aren't enough startup programs for non-tech businesses. And in very few communities, is there any kind of support for businesses that are established with products, but that want to scale. And so there's a number of ways that we can go about doing this. And we often also want to look at who's benefited from these programs in the past and how are we making sure that moving forward, that those programs or new programs that we might need to create are benefiting the demographic diversity of our community. We also look at anchors and major institutions that can be a part of the solution. Local procurement of products, connecting up the local supply chain in whatever way we can, so that the local businesses are getting investments from local anchors because they're buying things, they're their customers, so that we're recirculating those dollars within the community becomes important as well. And then the policies. So as I said before, my background's in city planning, so zoning is one of my languages, but there's a lot of different policies that are often barriers to this business sector going into our storefronts. Is artisan manufacturing an allowable use? What does the permitting process look like? Those are two easy ones to find, but often sometimes hard to solve. But then looking at all of the other policies of how we support local businesses and what goes on in our small scale manufacturing sector as well. And then all of the different ways we can build community pride, right? Even in this time of COVID, how are we helping people identify with being a part of this? How can we show them that there is pride to buying something local? How are we bringing people together, even if it's online, as a way to showcase what is exciting about our community? And those are some of the pieces that we really work to wrap up all together within that. Why do we do all of this? Well, I can tell you why I do all of this, and then I'm gonna really turn to you guys for some of the conversation on this. When I go out into communities before COVID hit, one of my favorite things to do is always to meet with business owners in their space of production, to see not only what their business was like and what they were making, but to give them an opportunity to really brag about what they're doing and what they're creating, so that they can show me their pride of what they were doing. And the pride that people have of creating something in their community is just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And these businesses are giving people an opportunity to have better paying jobs, to be proud of the job, the role that they're serving within their community, and to be able to reinvest in the community as well. We have wonderful local leaders from across the country who are stepping up to say, yes, this is a priority. This is a way we can create a more inclusive economy. This is a way we can create a downtown that really does include everybody from our community. And let's figure out the ways to go about doing that. So for me, it is all about making great places that people are proud to call home. And that is why I do all of this work. So that's information. If you do want to connect, you can always, like Jeff said, Mr. Stewart said, I am on LinkedIn, but my email address is also available to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So what I'd like to do, oh, there we go. What I'd like to do is do two things. And I'm just letting you know what's coming up as I reorganize my screen a little bit. First, I'd like to take any questions you have, clarifying questions you have about what I just shared. And then what I would like to do is ask you guys a few questions, which I know was shared in the notes in the packet for this, and really ask you, city council members, to share some thoughts with me as we go through some of these questions about your vision for the downtown. What are some of the assets that we should be thinking about building on? And what are some of the barriers that you're concerned about as well? So first, I'd like to open it up to any clarifying questions.
Ms. Bruce, this is Sunny Santa Ynez. Let me start. First of all, I want to thank Jeff and Jim for bringing you to see the Bellflower. And based on your presentation, I can feel your passion. It's very obvious, okay? It's right there. The way you make the presentation, the way you talk, I mean, it's there. And by the way, also, I was very impressed when I saw you, one of your photos, holding a drill. So you're a handy person. So, okay, good. That's really good. Okay. I, for one, has been looking for this kind of business in downtown because over the past years, we've been focusing on restaurants, eateries, and so on and so forth. And we cannot sustain downtown by just restaurants. We need to provide other places for people to shop. And I think that this will complement what we've been working for in the past. So I have a couple of questions here. First, I guess this may be a question to staff. In terms of zoning, I didn't get a chance to read our zoning. Are these types of business allowed already or permitted in downtown Bellflower?
Councilmember Santa Ynez, good morning. Most of them, the retail component is, but the manufacturing side or the hand making portion of it, the production side is not. So if we do go down this path, then likely what we're looking at are code changes to allow for these type of uses.
Okay, so a follow-up question to that. How does this differ with the brewery at the Exchange and also the one that's across the Hosanna Chapel in terms of zoning? Because my understanding is they're gonna have a brewery, right? So that's manufacturing.
Yes, but breweries are specifically listed in the zoning code as conditionally permitted.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Yeah, so we may capture a small portion of the small scale manufacturing, artisanal manufacturing, but not the full breadth of it.
Okay, so there's some already permitted, and others we have to work on that to expand those
Yes.
allowable use. Okay,
Yes.
wonderful.
Additionally, Mr. Mayor, just to add the Exchange, I know that Mr. Howard has talked about doing a brewery and distillery component in the Exchange, and that was covered under the DFD. And I want to point out also that it looks like we have a representative from Iron Fire here who is the shared office space use on the second level of the Exchange project, and I want to welcome them for listening in on this. I think it's an important, it shows a lot that they're looking to join the community. But regardless, that's how we covered those uses on that side of that section of the downtown area.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that they'll speak up later on.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Ms. Priest, again, one way question to you also is, in reading the materials before the meeting, I was kind of thinking that, correct me if I'm wrong, that a good portion of the potential entrepreneurs will be home-based business for now. And then, if that is the case, my question to you is, there is a significant shift. If I'm a home-based business owner, I'm not paying rent, but at the same time, I don't have the benefits of a storefront. So to me, the way I see myself is, it's a giant leap for me to move from home-based to storefront business. So how would you incentivize them to make that giant leap?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I don't know yet whether or not our biggest potential for growth is going to be home-based businesses or ones that are ready to just outgrow where they are right now. One of the things that we are going to do next with the city is do a set of interviews with small-scale manufacturing business owners who are in the city and nearby, so that we understand in detail where they are, what their needs are, both what's working and what's most challenging to them. And we are going to be talking to a set of home-based businesses. So I'll be able to provide you with more feedback about that in the future once we complete those interviews. In other communities, one of the things that we've seen very successfully happen is those micro retail spaces, so that when the home-based business knows that, I'll give you one example out of Ithaca, New York. I happened to be talking to them yesterday. They have a building that was a rehab of an old printing press building. And the property owner, the developer, took an alleyway, similar to what I was describing in DC, took this alleyway frontage and turned it into very small, like 300 square foot storefront space. He charges a flat fee on that. And so what he's found is that for home-based businesses to move into that space feels very low risk, because they know exactly what that fee is. And they know whether or not they've built up their business to be able to afford that monthly fee, be it $500 or $400 or whatever it is based on the market, which I don't know what your market's going to bear yet. So that predictability and that low cost space becomes an incentive, almost an incubator unto itself for these businesses. So one of the things that we look at when we look in communities is, are there properties where micro retail might work? Are there property owners that might be interested in it? And what are some of the other models? There's a lot of different real estate models out there now that we can pull into the community to also create other kinds of small shared spaces that could be a way to bring people out. The other thing that home-based businesses are looking for is that community, right? We know entrepreneurs thrive more when they have each other. That's why co-work spaces or incubator programs or startup programs are so successful, is because being a business owner is sometimes very lonely, and you want to find other people who are also business owners to be around. And so if we can create models with co-work for small scale manufacturers, the incentive to be in part of the space is not just having a space for production, but it's also about being part of that community. So I will be able to come back to you after the interviews with more feedback about that as well.
But based on the cities that you've worked on, if you were to do a survey of those businesses, what percentage of them started as home-based business? What percentage relocated from a different location to downtown? And number three, what percentage stayed in downtown but took a larger space? If you can have just kind of give us a ballpark.
I wish I could have numbers for you. Our country does not collect good statistics on this sector. There are national codes, right? The NAICS codes that give us characteristics of different businesses, but small scale manufacturing actually crosses 52 different categories within that. And that's the basis of some of my national analysis. So I can't tell you on a national basis what that looks like. A small town in Alabama, East Alabama, called Heflin is going to be a totally different ratio than something like Bellflower in terms of that. So there are definitely some of each. And the impact of COVID potentially throws all of that out the window as well. I know of small scale manufacturing businesses that gave up storefronts and took their 3 employees, and everybody's doing production from home right now because they're too worried about spending the money on this. So it's really about finding the different businesses within that community, understanding what they're worried about, and then solving for those barriers within the community.
Mm-hmm. And another question is, in your prior experience, how far do you go in terms of attracting businesses, let's say beyond the city, behind the city border, so to speak?
Absolutely. My priority is always starting with people who live in the city. I work really hard to make sure that whatever we're doing, first and foremost, is benefiting the people who live there. So I've worked with Jim and with Beth to really do a lot of work on finding businesses that are locally owned and connecting with people who can help us find more of those businesses that are locally owned. And always welcome more recommendations of other locally owned product businesses. You are also in the middle of a large metropolitan area. So, it's also fair to say, looking within the broader region of people who might be attracted to Bellflower's downtown because maybe it's more affordable than where they are, or because they're excited about what's coming in the future and want to be a part of its growth. That's also a great opportunity. I generally don't recommend looking at distant recruitment until we have this sector established and have ways of supporting the sector. There's no reason to make a case for some business that might be 2 hours away to come move there. And that's not generally what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at folks within the city or the nearby region.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, let me move on to Councilmember Hamada. Do you have any question of Miss Bruce?
Yes, thank you, Sonny. Just to kind of give look at Elena. Well, again, first off, thank you, Elena and staff for bringing this forward. This is, this concept is, quite intriguing. And just to give Alana, some background on me, actually, I'm one of those planners too, more, West Coast style. So, I won't call us nerds, planner nerds, but we would really get into it, and I think it's all about setting, and I know you've done work in some of the other, again, towns across the nation, and it's all about setting too, and that economics that you mentioned, and here on the West Coast, the land values are just skyrocketed, and do you see these types of businesses more so working better as a sort of in a group setting? I think about some of the other area cities that have, reuse of a packing house, and where they've put all these businesses in there, and yeah, some are doing some minor production that would be incidental. Others, and again, it's mostly just retail, eating, and so on, typical. But to add this feature of actually seeing it produced, to see a tortilla produced, or a candle, or something like that'd be cool. And you had mentioned as part of the education. Kids will enjoy that. It's definitely an attraction. You find in some of the other cases where these uses, and it really depends on the use, such as if it might be more intense, like maybe some of the production type, land use compatibility is always a big thing.
Right.
And how it works with like odors or noise and other things that I know it's at a smaller scale, but still, if we're in a setting that's, you mentioned, if it works, mixed use, it's working, maybe not working at times, right now, residential it's being scooped up, but the commercial component still a little, lagging. Because again, here, this setting, and to have it maybe scattered, which it'd be great for like a downtown to stroll and check out all the places, but I think again, with the land values and development here on the West Coast, it tends to be bigger. So
right. I yes is the answer. There's a number of challenges and there's a number of ways of getting there. Places that are hot markets, like where you are, I'm in DC. It's hard. It's definitely hard to do because the land value is so high. My experience is that a lot of developers, though, are doing pro formas for their properties, their mixed-use properties, and planning on making no money off of their commercial space because it's so unpredictable right now. And that's not going to be everybody, but they're really trying to pencil the projects, expecting very little or almost, sort of basic cost of construction coverage out of their commercial space lease rates that they're factoring in. And so I think that gives us an opportunity to approach current property owners and future property owners to say, we have a way to create an exciting brand for a place and this is what we're seeing in a number of developments here in DC and in a number of hot markets, by turning at least some portion of that ground floor from new construction and over to these microspaces or to small scale manufacturers in slightly larger spaces, they're creating a cool factor that makes their property stand out from something that's more generic. It's not a chain. It's not something you can see everywhere. It's really the reason that draws people to a location. And it's actually, if you have a big enough property, it actually increases the value of your apartments upstairs because you have this brand of your ground floor. And so there's a lot of interesting conversations going on around that on the real estate development side. Your other question in terms of groups of them, there's no doubt. The business owners definitely thrive to some degree more. I don't have numbers on it, but they definitely look for each other, either to be in close proximity physically to each other or to be organized in some way through meetups or events and programming that can support them together. People want to be a part of an identified community. The most surprising thing to me every time I go out to interview small scale manufacturing businesses is almost to a T, their reaction has been up until now, wait, the city cares that I'm here? Like they're surprised that anybody is paying attention to them because this is a business sector that's always sort of flown under the radar. And so just by pulling them together and making them this identified business sector, figuring out what kind of resources and support they need, that's an important set of first steps. When there is an opportunity to create either shared space, commercial spaces, like a co-work manufacturing space, or micro retail where they are neighbors, or even concentrating them on a set of blocks, right? So that even if they're not in the same building, if you're strolling for 15 minutes up and down Bellflower, you could stop into a bunch of these blocks. It becomes a reason to be a destination as it's mixed into stuff. So there are a lot of ways to create that grouping and to create that identity as well, both in the existing stock as well as new construction as it happens.
Yeah, some of those pictures you showed, it made me reminisce on I grew up on homemade shirts until the 7th grade, and short hair too, like a flat top. So, it's cool to always think about, and then, some of the businesses you showed, like the one soap maker, you had said just a single cauldron. She's making her soap, and I thought about how zoning would treat it, and some situations, that would, to me would be incidental to the sales portion. That's right. That one cauldron, it took up a small space, and the rest of it's store and sales. To me, that's a retail store.
Right, but we want to make it as easy as possible, and this is something when we get to the policy side, right? We want to make it as easy as possible. So the first artisan I showed you, she makes handbags out of leather and wax canvas. Her production space was 90% of her storefront, right? Of her store, of her square footage. Her retail space was active, but it was the vast minority of her space. And so I think we have to look at all of the different ways, and definitely there's questions of noise and ventilation that need to be looked at from a technical standpoint. Not everything makes sense to have on Main Street and in the middle of downtown, but there are a lot of things that can work really well there.
So like some of these small shops, jobs comes with it, and are there some that will have like 10, 15 employees with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sewing.
When I look at, and sometimes it's in textiles or in food production, there's a wonderful business around here that's been growing. They started by borrowing somebody's kitchen on the off hours that the restaurant was closed in the middle of the night. And then they borrowed, a kitchen of a cafe that closed at 2 p.m. And then they moved to a commercial shared kitchen. And now they're moving into their own 5,000 square foot commercial kitchen that they've built out themselves. And that's still 5,000 square feet is tiny on the manufacturing scale, but she's becoming a multi-million-dollar dessert making company. She does direct to consumer on her website, and the vast majority of her sales are wholesale. So there's really interesting ways to see these businesses grow.
Actually, I know a pie maker in town. She's on her own, uses her own stove, which just recently broke. So, and I think she'll be I think it'd be one to talk to, just to get a sense of, what's her vision for, for the future, and maybe a setting like this could, could be supported.
Wonderful. Please give her name to Jim.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Jim, on that front, do you have any data in your department on home-based businesses that the community, or is that something you don't have a feel for at this moment? I have no idea myself.
Well, interestingly, I asked Sonny for some information about this, and he did the lookup on small home-based businesses. There are a number of them here in the community, but whether or not they are scalable, small-scale manufacturers is something we need to go through the list on and find out.
Right. Okay.
Well, Jeff, in response to your question, when I look at the list, most of them are service-oriented.
Right. That would be my guess too.
There was one manufacturer that I forwarded the name to Jim that may be met. It's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean,
other than that, there's not much manufacturing that are home-based right now.
There are a couple businesses I know, kind of intriguing businesses that probably aren't even legally run out of the house, and it'd be very difficult to license them even on the boulevard. I mean, for instance, there's a group of folks that are serving mixed drinks and delivering them to different houses. There's these custom mixed drinks by, expert bar people, and apparently quite tasty and all that. They're getting a fair amount of money for them, but I don't know how in heck we would make that a legal operation on the boulevard under the current ABC rules. So
yeah. Let me qualify my statement. I only look at the listing of businesses that are licensed.
Right. Exactly. I just didn't know.
We need a good tamale maker in town.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That'll
Okay.
encourage me to
All
come
right.
visit.
All right.
So,
I'd love to
Thank you.
hear
Are you done?
Are there any other questions that people have?
Yes.
And then
Let
I'd love
me
to.
give. How about Councilmember Sanchez, please?
Thank you, Councilmember Sandinez. Well, first off, good morning, everyone, and Ms. Cruz, thank you for your presentation, lovely presentation. I'll start off with the positive because I believe that's where I want to live at the beginning of this, and then I'll come up with more. I'll kind of share my concerns and thoughts and challenges for this kind of concept. First off, conceptually, I think it's a great idea. I think that Bellflower in itself, the community and the people that live in this city and how it's transformed over the years would really benefit from that. I think one of your points on your presentation is the seeking out for diverse business owners and ensuring that everyone's, has a piece of the pie, having translators and things of that nature. I think that's all phenomenal. I think Bellflower in itself, and I've always kind of spoken about this, especially when the idea is, when we look at what's around us, you look at the city of Lakewood, the city of Downey, the city of Cerritos and such, we can't do what they've done, which is, malls and, big auto zones and things of that nature. We've got to be unique. We've got to be different. We've got to be our own niche. This, I think, aligns with that, to Mr. Councilmember Sonny Inez's point. We can't also only survive on restaurants. We've got to find other additional, revenues and streams of businesses. And I think that this conceptually, as of right now, could provide that next factor. I don't think that it's a one-pronged approach, though. I think that there's a multi-pronged approach. And now I'll kind of go into some of my concerns and my thoughts. Oops, sorry. One more positive. We have access points. We've got the highways. We're very, we've got the 105 and 91, the 605. So that's another good thing for this concept. My initial concerns are, do we have enough body heat? Do we have enough foot traffic? I know you presented a brief, what may have seemed a way of attacking the marketing plan for it, but I don't believe that'll be sufficient. I think that something like this is going to have to go hand in hand with us creating more residential housing in the downtown, in the immediate downtown, as well as also creating a really, realistically, a more pedestrian-friendly downtown, slowing down traffic, improving the desirability for the families in the nearby downtown area to actually want to, walk through the city at all times of the day. We've seen great improvement in that, and I'll give a round of applause from my fellow council colleagues who have been on the council for a lot longer than I have. Just for the record, Ms. Cruz, I've only been on the council for a month, so so I'm also the newest member. So they've done a great job in that sense and moving us in that direction. But I think now if we're going to do something like this, we've got to take it the next step further. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about parklets. I'm talking about higher density and things of that nature. So I think that all would have to play into a factor, because what I really hate to see happen is what's happened in downtown, or not downtown, but in Long Beach on 2nd and Pine. They've attempted this. They've attempted this whole small scale manufacturing and things, and they're not succeeding. They're struggling. The businesses are struggling. They don't have the traffic that they need, one, and two, from what my understanding, and I say this from talking to actually a friend who is a chocolate factory in 2nd and Pine. I don't believe that they were supported well enough to go into contracts with these landlords, because that's my other fear. My other fear here is that our landlords that own some of these properties in the heart of the town, they may not see this as beneficial to them, or for whatever many reasons, they just ask for too much. And so whether they'll lease or sell their properties is a big question mark. So I think that this part of the program itself we would have to facilitate and help negotiate these leases. And I don't know if that's part of your strategy or not. But again, those are just my initial concerns with this whole thing. I think that if we just move without having other things in place and other plans in place to actually bring the bodies, it may not work, and I'm concerned for that. Then I have some straightforward questions that maybe you can answer. In your experience where you've done this before, is this meant to be a temporary or short-term development, for lack of a better word, or is this long-term? Is this what the heart of the downtown would be moving forward indefinitely, or at least for the immediate long future? Or what's your thought on that?
My hope is that it's part of the local economic development work long-term.
Okay.
I've definitely met real estate developers that use this for their short-term benefit to create a presence. And then once the values go up, they displace these businesses. That's not why I do this. I think that there is both short-term and long-term benefits to putting in and retaining locally owned businesses in our Main Street storefronts. Like you were talking about the surrounding places, you're not going to be your neighbors. You have to create your own presence and your own niche. And when you put your own locally owned small product businesses in your storefronts, there's no competition. There's no place that is like you. You're investing in your uniqueness, and uniqueness is what sells to the region, and uniqueness is what sells nationally, right? It's why people go on vacation to places. It's because they want those unique experiences when we can travel again. So my work is always focused on how do we use this as a start, but then also how do we plan for wild success is the way I phrase it. If we are so successful that the market gets really hot and your train station comes in, these businesses are very likely to be displaced. I mean, I see it happening all over DC, unfortunately. So one of the things that we think about one of the things that I'll do, and I can talk about this for a second, we do all these interviews and meetings with folks over the next bunch of weeks. I turn around and I create a set of recommendations. The recommendations are specific actions that I recommend that the city take. It is going to be up to you guys to pick which ones to act on. But the actions that I'm going to recommend are going to be specific things that you can do in the next 3 to 12 months. And anywhere that it exists somewhere in the country, I'm going to give you that specific reference so that you can take somebody else's model, customize it to yourself, and adopt it as quickly as possible. And I think that action is one of the most important things. So I will be asking questions about what are the things we need to put in place right now to plan for that wild success so that we can retain these businesses over the long haul. I want to be that to be really clear. I think your point around we don't have enough foot traffic and we want to set these businesses up to succeed is really essential to talk about. I completely support more residential downtown. I will always support parklets. I will always support more pedestrian safety. That is the entire history of my career before I started working on small scale manufacturing. I worked in the world of smart growth and community redevelopment. Anything I can do about that, just let me know. And I agree that investment in downtown and that creating downtown as a place people want to spend time is an essential part of this. One of the wonderful things for me about small scale manufacturing is that when we find the right businesses, they're already making their revenues online right now, most likely. And so they're not dependent on the foot traffic up front. The goal to me, especially given where you guys are today, is to find businesses like that, where once they're in the storefront, they can be the amenity, they can be the draw that makes it a reason that somebody might go to a restaurant and then walk down the street to see this cool stuff being made or to pop into that shop to see the stuff made. But that business's bottom line is not going to be dependent on your foot traffic because you don't have it right now. So we don't want to set them up to lose. We want to set them up to succeed. The other thing that we look at is what kind of programming does the city need to take on? What kind of events, right? What kind of branding? These are other investments. Some of them are really easy to pull off. Some of them are hard. One of the communities that we worked with, I guess it's now almost 2 years ago, is Columbia, Missouri. They have a corridor that's mostly parking lots. It's not their downtown. It's actually an improvement district north of downtown, parking lots and setback buildings, but they have an improvement district and their director of their improvement district gets this. And we did a project with them. And one of the things that they did immediately was they started doing these tiny pop-ups in one parking lot where they had maker activities, for the kids, and they had 6 vendors who sold stuff. And it immediately started changing people's perception of that area of the city. All of a sudden, people with families were showing up in a place where trucks drove by otherwise. And so there are all these little things that we can do to immediately start changing people's perception and the activities. And I'm not going to say it's easy work, but there's a lot of those incremental things that we can do. And so that's a lot of what we'll talk about along the way too.
So Ilana, when you're talking about your list of actions that you want the city to take, you're including those sorts of things. You're talking about zoning, you're talking about parking, you're talking about inclusion and programming and things like that. I mean, are you talking also about financial assistance and that sort of thing as well, or no?
We may, and this is going to be dependent on what we find out from the business owners and the property owners. One of the next step that we have is to go do these interviews and small group meetings. We're going to talk to small scale manufacturing business owners. We're going to talk to a bunch of your property owners, and we're going to talk to people who are involved in small business support or engagement in that community in some way. And the sets of questions I'm going to ask them are similar to what I gave to you guys in the material up front, but it's going to dive a little bit deeper, especially for the property owners, and what's in the way from us being able to do this.
Right.
And for some of them, it's going to be a mental barrier, right? There's a mindset issue, but for some of them, there might actually be a bottom line issue. And if there is, we can pull together a set of recommendations that may include financial incentives.
I'm presuming you're not talking about incentives that are equated to the old redevelopment rules in California before 2000, and you're not. So you're looking at some entirely different set of Okay, because what we found is that the city has inadvertently sort of benefited from the end of redevelopment because we never participated in redevelopment as usual,
Right.
and the efforts that we made were kind of stilted and not well executed. But because of land values dropping below the neighboring cities, as mentioned before, Downey, Lakewood, et cetera, we found some niche opportunities which we've used and exploited. And I think this is prime for that. I think that what I'd love to do is to find a way to attract others in Long Beach, for instance, that are paying, $1.75, $2 a square foot to the downtown where they can pay substantially less and still have the same sort of traffic and population draws on the 5-mile radius that they have in Long Beach. And I don't know, that's kind of the missing part for me, part for us. And I think that's kind of one of the ways we're going to be looking for help on that.
So Ilana, if I
Definitely.
may, so on that, you touched on a few things that I was really interested in hearing, and I'm glad that you're mentioning some of those that kind of address some of my concerns, and I know that'll come in your later plans. With regards to like this, will the city need to provide a seed funding? That I'm sure will come into in your plan at a later date as to how much would be necessary. But I'm looking forward to hearing on that end. The other short question on it is more so, we talked about the zoning, and it sounds like we would need to have a flexible zoning within that area to be able to support any kind of small manufacturer that comes into play. Do you, when you've done this in other cities, did you anticipate or did you have a lot of modifications or upgrades to the current public infrastructures to support these types of businesses?
The public infrastructure,
As in like electricity, sewage, water?
not so much. Usually we were trying to figure out how to build off of what was there already. Infrastructure improvements, as you know, are very costly and time consuming. So most of the time I'm trying to figure out what can we do right now? What fits right now? Because our communities are so hungry for this stuff. I mean, it is wonderful to see, but it is really, to me, it's really about what can we do right now? And so for the most part, these businesses, the businesses that would work well into a storefront are ones that are going to be fine with the existing infrastructure that any other restaurant would need. Maybe that specific building needs a heavy up, right? Maybe that specific business needs special ventilation that we have to figure out how to help them afford, but nothing unusual.
Okay, all right, that's good. Just my concerns are also the barrier to entry, and so I would see that as being one of them if there be the need to, make a lot of changes to that infrastructure, just because I've heard the nightmares of how that can be. So, okay, let's see. I think Councilmember Inez, I think that. Oh, sorry, one more question. In your experience in other cities where you're doing this, do you take a role? Does the city take a role in helping facilitate these negotiations with landlords, or are they left alone to do it independently?
So I do not serve in that role. I'm not a broker. But if there is a need for that, there are a number of different ways that I can recommend, both ones that are nonprofit led, that might be led by some entity in the community. There are specific roles that cities have taken. Sometimes it's as simple as making introductions. There's one city I'm working with where they actually have somebody on the city staff within the small business community that's just making introductions. It's a lot of a part of what she's doing right now. So there's a lot of different ways to get there. Again, it's going to come back to what are the questions that the property owners have? What's their mindset around this? What are the barriers that they are perceiving? If we find somebody who is a really excited and willing partner, which is part of what we're working on with the city, is let's try to find a couple of property owners that we think would really be excited about this. Well, then let's help them figure out how to make it happen is going to be a big part of that.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Because like I said, that'd be one of my concerns, right?
Yeah.
Because these people, it sounds like the businesses that you're kind of bringing in, the business owners that you would bring in, they'd already have a mental barrier, right? The whole idea between coming from their garage and I think Councilmember Inez talked about it, moving from their garage and moving to a storefront.
Right.
That can already be cumbersome as is. So, okay, great.
Yeah.
And then lastly, would you be able to provide us with some information as to the population sizes in some of the cities that you've been successful in within the immediate downtown? And just to kind of give us a point of view as to if we're there or we're not there, if we need, and you don't have to, if you can provide the factual numbers to Jim.
You mean, I think you mean, Victor, you mean specifically not the size, the population of the city, but the number of people living in the areas that they're developing as a micro manufacturing space. So right. I think what Victor's looking for is, residency density standards, because I think it's all changing. And frankly, Ilana, that goes to my last question as well. As we start looking at more inclusive zoning rules to allow this in, are we looking at changing the zoning rules to allow people to go in by right more than, say, for instance, through a conditional use permit? And how we do that, here's my question. So you have an artisanal art maker who works in metal, right? And he welds metal pieces together, hangs it on the wall, and goes. If we allow the zoning to be more expansive to allow that, how do we stop a welding shop who does welding repairs to go in the downtown, which probably wouldn't be as an acceptable use to the city as not? And my question is, how do we open up the zoning and still keep control of the type of the artisanal uses that we want to see in the downtown area? I mean, again, we see these micro motorcycle, custom motorcycle shops that are pretty cool. There'll be these great shoppers, they sell them on TV, the whole 9 yards. But you certainly don't want a motorcycle repair shop downtown, for instance. Maybe, maybe not. But I guess I'm trying to figure out how we differentiate what, but one man's art's another man's repair shop,
Right. And to me, I'd start drawing lines around what are the external impacts. I look in there is some standard sort of basic definitions that are getting adopted nationally around an artisan manufacturing land use definition, and I can share those.
Yeah, I think that's going to be important.
Yeah, and then there's some places where we got more complicated about it. In Fairfax County, Virginia, they wanted to get into a lot of details about external impacts and parking, and we created a lot more detail about what was going to go into that land use definition. In general, we're going to look at whatever's the loudest thing that's already allowed in that zone. We don't want to be any louder than that, right? And so, there is near me in a very high-end suburban sort of commercial center, there's a car repair garage. The front of the building is painted the most glorious, shiny, bright white you've ever seen. They have one roll-top door. Cars are either in or they're gone, right? There's some very specific rules that they're following, but it's not to me about the use, even though there's like an Apple store right around the corner from this, right? It's one of these parts of the city. It's much more about what is that external impact, and especially when we're talking about Main Street, to me, it's also what are you seeing through the windows, right? To me, one of the really important things, and this is where we've lost so much ground in a lot of cities nationwide, is because a lot of places couldn't get enough retail into their storefronts, they allowed service businesses into their storefronts. So all of a sudden you have curtains and you have blinds in these windows instead of something dynamic, something that is a storefront that allows people to see in. That part to me is much more important. And then when we're looking at mixed use, there's all sorts of fabrication requirements in terms of safety and fire and that kind of stuff that we have to factor in. But Nashville, Tennessee has a great urban manufacturing land use definition. Indianapolis adopted almost the exact same thing, as did a whole bunch of other cities now. Montgomery County, Maryland has a definition. And then Fairfax County has a more specific definition that we help them create. So there are a lot of examples. I completely understand your concerns about wanting to figure out where the line is. I would do it by right. I would draw the lines around what you think is most important, and I would do it by right to make sure that these businesses understand that they can come in as easily as possible.
Okay, so I guess my question is, so you're looking at categories of uses and sort of an overlay, a downtown overlay zone is what I think you're looking at here, right? Or no?
Or you add in a permitted land use.
Okay. So what we're going to need, though, is we're going to have pretty tight definitions, because one thing I've learned about this city is the property owners here and the entrepreneurs here are pretty creative. And like I said, I mean, I mean that both positively and negatively. I always like the creativity, but some of the stretching that's done on allowable use is pretty crazy. So I think we're going to have to be really focused on the types of uses and what the feel of those uses are. And I don't know how you define that. Yeah. Again, you don't want a pipe fitter in there, but you want a guy that bends pipe or something, like that. I don't know how you do that.
Well, and ultimately will be up to you guys, right? I can make a recommendation that it should be as right. If you guys are more comfortable with doing it as a conditional use for your first years of allowing this, then that's what you're going to do.
Well, I don't know that I am. I mean, conditional use brings a lot of headaches to a lot of people, and it scares away a lot of entrepreneur types. I mean, minimally, we'd have to look at the fee structure and all that to make sure it doesn't scare people away. But the process, we can get somebody done in 90 days on a CUP, but you're right. If we could do it by right, it's better. So maybe you define some core uses, and then you have some secondary uses that would require a CUP. I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud in some of our experience here, and I think that's going to be the challenge here.
We can definitely work on that. That's not a problem.
Good.
Okay, Councilmember Santos, are you finished?
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, very good. And Jeff, I think one option in terms of CUPs, we can provide some kind of incentive if it is for this district, for example. Maybe reduce CUP fees or maybe waive it, and then also the timeline and things like that. I mean, there's another way to kind of skin the cat, so to speak.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I thought about that too, but that, it's going to be a matter of we're going to find some comfort zone. And Beth and I'm sure will have a lot of discussions about this. I actually don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be a fair amount of work, and we're going to have to invest a little intellectual equity in this to make it work. So
yeah, but I think we have options on how to do it.
I mean, it doesn't stop me if I want to do it. I absolutely want to jump in and do it. I just don't. All of a sudden, it doesn't seem as easy as I thought it was maybe a month ago.
Nothing is easy.
I know.
And I just want to piggyback on Councilmember Sanchez's comment about foot traffic. I, for one, am a firm believer that we need to create something. We need to have something so that people will come to Bellflower in general and downtown in particular. And a good example of that is downtown Bellflower. If you look back, let's say 10, 12 years ago, downtown Bellflower, you only have, I can remember, Salazar's, Johnny Rebs, and Marinos before that. And then once we brought in the Korean barbecue, I mean, things just started to change. And that's what I want to see again. Again, I'm a firm believer that we need to create something for people to come to downtown Bellflower.
Well, in addition to the Korean barbecue, but Sonny, remember, in addition to the Korean barbecue, that was your first mixed use project downtown, and it was successful and good looking. So, I mean, I think that
exactly.
is get too. So
we need to kind of replicate that in a smaller scale, so to speak.
Or a bigger scale. I think we need 1,000 units downtown, frankly, but I'm going to let a consultant tell me that.
When I say small, I mean small one business at the time,
No, I think the key is going to be density. And as Victor said it best, it's body heat. I mean, I didn't think about it that way, but that's exactly what it is. So, yeah.
Okay. All right, moving along. Ileana, you mentioned that you have questions for us.
Well, you've answered many of them along the way in this discussion. I just, the number one question I just wanted to open up for you guys is, are there specific assets of downtown or of the city itself that you think I should be taking into account as we're thinking about how to go about doing this? Things that I find that it's much faster to build on things that are already working and that are already a great asset than starting from scratch. We're going to end up recommending to do both, but it means it's important for me to understand what are the assets that you already recognize that are in the city.
Well, of course, as Victor mentioned, we have the access to the freeway. So anyone coming to Bellflower, let's say within maybe a 10-mile radius, it's going to be very easy for them to come to Bellflower. And we already have some foot traffic, not as much as we wanted to see right now because of the restaurant's business. Of course, prior to the pandemic, and things changed right after that. And I would say we have a vibrant downtown already. Looking back, prior to COVID-19, we have a very closely knit community. People tend to patronize what we have in the city, and I think that's to me that's a few things that are kind of stand out.
Yes, let me echo on some of that, but I think the one key is I think there is great political support of such opportunities. I think the council has definitely been open-minded, and they hear the input, and we've always, and again, as a planner, always look at the big picture. Yes, the regional access is great here. This is a very diverse community. It's gotten there. It opens up a lot of avenues for opportunities, and definitely would love to see the variety of businesses that could serve this area and draw others here. And yeah, it's been mentioned before, we've been focusing on the uniqueness of things here. And I think staff and the ideas that are being thrown out there are in line with that. So I think there is a decent business-to-business, activity you know, I mean, there is a Chamber of Commerce, but you know, I think there's some room to grow with that. But and was I gonna something? It's been mentioned, but I think you had mentioned about getting the business behind, and also now the property owners and I know staff will confirm is we're back on track to work on a bid for downtown. So hopefully that will come to fruition. And I think we got opportunity here. There's still sites available. As I mentioned, the price of land is still high, but as Mr. Stewart mentioned, it's lower than others in the area. So that was a great point. And I always tell some of the council members in Long Beach, I'd love to take some of the businesses from Bixby Knolls, and bring them here. But we'll see. But we're still a fragmented, town from a standpoint of land. It's, I mean, on a single block, you could have, like a dozen, different property owners. So it's all small cut and pieces. And there's, we were on track to hopefully consolidate and look at some bigger projects. But I think this use can work again, not only in parts of downtown, but also in other parts of the city. Actually, I think there's some other main thoroughfares in town that could use something unique and bring businesses to those areas. We have multiple nuclei here in town, where people shop at or go eat at. So as mentioned by my colleagues, the vision for downtown, to be a destination, to be pedestrian friendly, to provide variety and diverse opportunities. I think we're on track, and I've been to other cities, in California that have done some great things. And again, Bixby Knolls itself locally in Long Beach, that stretch has dramatically improved. I think partly because of the bid, definitely, and that leadership there. And then the San Luis Obispo, focused around always, I think it has to deal with history too. The historic parts of town that people always remember and go back to the theater, work around from that center point. Or a few years ago, I was at Hanford, California, and again, history, the rail, and so on, and working around a certain famous location like the Superior Dairy. It was dairy, land. Bellflower, dairy land too, farming. So there might things will work out. So it's definitely something to look at here. I'm definitely open, and I think there's some tweaking on land use and zoning definitions but like I said, it's an opportunity, and so something we can at least look at it and then evaluate, and hopefully some form could come forth, because I think there's a lot of people out there that definitely want to start some kind of business, and they're not going to jump right in to a big spot and pay the big rents, and that's why I mentioned about getting as a group of them together, and maybe it works out better there, from a standpoint of affordability and then attraction, and then sharing, and so on. So, all right.
Thank you.
Well, Ms. Cruz, to answer your question on what are our assets, I think my colleagues have answered a fair amount of them. Just to add a few, just quickly, I think, I'm not sure if the parking structure was mentioned. We've got a great parking structure. We've got the train, the rail coming in. Can't remember if that was already mentioned. One thing I'll tell you about the local business owners, they all support each other. They follow each other on social media. They share their content. They talk to each other. They communicate, and they do support themselves. Yes, there's probably a few that are out of the loop still, but for the most part, I think there's the downtown area specifically, the core business owners there are communicating, and I think that's always beautiful to have. And then we've got great staff. I think that's an asset. We've got creative, flexible staff that do the work, that are willing to work with anyone that comes to City Hall. And so you got a great council who listens and is a part of the community and is involved. And I think those are all assets that a lot of our cities around us don't have. So I'll end it with that for now. And if I think of any else, I'll send them to Jim.
Thank you. No, this is wonderful. I really appreciate the feedback, and I appreciate your thoughts about what is working, because it's always helpful to understand what people are already proud of, and allows us to continue to build on that. So thank you.
All right, Ilana, do you have any other question for us before I open the meeting? Okay. All right, at this point, I'd like to open the meeting to the public, and I want to thank you for waiting, and hopefully you will participate in this discussion. So, Madam Deputy City Clerk, can you open the public to this meeting?
Yes, I'll give the public a moment to utilize the feature.
All right, thank you.
Mhm. I'm not seeing any public, I'm sorry, I have a
there's one.
public comment from Logan Whitehead. If you'd give me a moment to get the timer up on the screen. Okay, Mr. Whitehead, you may begin.
All right, thank you for giving me time to speak. I am a current college student at Cal State Fullerton. I'm about to graduate this spring. And I heard about this program from my supply chain management club. And I think it's a great opportunity for your city. I can see how it can attract entrepreneurs from not just Bellflower, but cities surrounding Bellflower. I just wanted to show my support for this program and also just say my idea. I suggested a cooperation for manufacturing clothes. So I would have a staff of fashion designers as well as people that actually manufacture the clothes. And my main target would be influencers, specifically on like YouTube, and people that are trying to make a name for themselves and entertain for a living, but majority of their income come from their manufacturing of clothes and their merchandise. So I wanted to give them an opportunity not to go through a third party, but not necessarily, but also be able to design their clothes themselves and be a part of that process. And I also think that, this program with the glass and everything like that, and people being able to walk through the downtown and see things actually being made, I think it's a really good opportunity for your downtown to be rejuvenated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehead, for your input. Madam Deputy City Clerk, anyone else?
Yes, next I have Josh Renscher of Ironfire Workspaces.
All right, thank you.
My video is turned off. Is it possible to unlock my video? Thank you.
Yes.
There we go. Thanks, everyone. Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Renscher. Oh, should I wait for the timer to start? Sorry. My name is Josh Renscher. I'm the founder and CEO of Ironfire Workspaces. Some of you may know that we are opening our new location in Bellflower at the Exchange in partnership with Howard CDM in a few months. So we're really excited about that. So just want to say I'm excited to meet more of you as time goes by. I wholeheartedly agree with everything Ms. Prue said. I think my neck is sore from nodding during her presentation, and I think Zoom should add a like button so I could at least express that. I wish I had something intelligent to add to the conversation, but everything she said was really right on the mark, from the idea of building community among the local business owners and makers, to activating unused storefronts, to the programming, the community, and economic development benefits of these kind of businesses. Absolutely goes hand in hand with the kind of thing that we do at Ironfire. We're more oriented toward office style workers, where she's more oriented towards people who work with their hands and make things. But they're absolutely complementary. I think when you have these kind of businesses together, whether it's the same block or the same building or even in the same neighborhood, it really does create a hub of entrepreneurial activity. It creates a draw for the neighborhood. It becomes a destination, and I think all of that is completely valid. And I'm speaking fast because I'm on the clock, but I just want to echo a lot of the things that were said, because I wholeheartedly agree with that. I also agree with a lot of the concerns that were raised, especially some that Mr. Sanchez raised. Very good points, and I think all those points are things that have been addressed elsewhere and can easily be addressed in Bellflower too. But I agree with all that as well. If there's one thing I could add in my last minute, it's regarding the landlords. A lot of landlords, especially the more institutional and traditional landlords, are going to have to realize that their properties are not going to be used or leased the same way that they have been in a post-pandemic world. Even when the pandemic is far behind us, everything's changed permanently. I think once they realize that, the next task is to show them how these types of businesses are actually going to add more value to their assets than a traditional lease would. And once they get on board with that, and especially if you get a group of landlords to get on board with that, they really can become supportive of this business model. And I hope we'll see a lot more of that. So thank you for the time, and nice to meet more of you, and hope to meet you all in person soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rancher. Please encourage your associates to move to Bellflower. And we hope to see you very soon.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Deputy City Clerk, anyone else?
I'm seeing no further raised hands.
Okay, so with that, we're going to go back to the meeting. Ms. Bruce and Jim, I think you can feel that the council members are not just supportive of this effort. I think you can feel that we're very enthusiastic about this. And so my next question to you now is, what's going to be our next steps?
So I can tell you what I'm doing next. The next step from my work is I'm working with Jim and Beth they've done an amazing job working with me to identify small scale manufacturing businesses in and around the city, property owners, people can help us connect up with more of these businesses, as well as folks who are part of the support network around this sector. They are now starting to extend invitations, or they will start extending invitations to these individuals to participate in a series of one-on-one interviews and small group meetings, so that we can get all this specific information about what's going on in your community, which is going to go on over the next couple of weeks. After that, I will take all of that input along with what you guys provided me today, and I will be providing the city with a report that is both a summary of what we heard, here are the assets, here are the challenges, here are the, really focusing on the outcomes that we were talking about today about building this vibrancy downtown and inclusive economic opportunity. What are the steps that we can recommend? And they will cross all of these different buckets: business development, real estate, branding, promotional events, right? All of the different ways that we can get at it, and really planning for that wild success. I'm doing this because I talk about waving my magic wand. So I wave my magic wand and we look at wild success. How are we planning for that to make sure that we're still including these businesses along the way? And then I will be able to provide that memo to the city with the set of recommendations. And then what I always recommend to every community is pick three. Pick three of them that you're going to commit to making happen now. And that's where I leave it in your hands.
Right.
What are those examples of those three items? Give us a kind of a lay
Oh,
of the
they're
land.
so different for every place.
Yeah, I know.
Columbia,
Just give us some examples of what to look forward to.
Columbia, Missouri decided to activate the space on their corridor immediately, which they did. Their second one was to create a commercial shared kitchen, which they opened a little bit more than a year later because of COVID. And their third one was zoning changes, which they're just working on now, which is slower for them.
Why did they want the commercial strength kitchen? What was that? What was that for? What was the?
When we did interviews in Columbia, Missouri, we found that there was a huge demand for cottage food businesses that were home-based that had outgrown their home-based. And so the improvement district partnered with the Regional Economic Development Authority, leased below market rate space from the university, from the old kitchen that they had in one of their buildings. And now they did improvements on it to create a commercial shared kitchen that's nonprofit and mission driven, specifically to reach underrepresented business owners in the community.
Okay.
So what kind of timeline approximately are you looking at here?
Oh, you guys are going to have the report within a matter of months. By the end of March.
Oh, okay, that quick, huh? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. And I guess questions to staff, how does this fit into your work schedule?
Shoehorned, but we're making it happen. It's fun and it's exciting. It's cool to be working hand in hand with Beth on this, and having a project that we're working on together. And it's just part of what we do. It is what it is. We're working on it.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Councilmember Santinez, if I may,
go
have
ahead.
a question for staff. Just curious, is there a specific reason why we're stopping at Cedar and not going all the way to Rose?
I think it's going all the way to the boundary, right? I think that's the next street, but it goes all the way down to the south boundary, I believe. I think Cedar was a mistake.
Got it. Okay, just thought I'd ask.
I was about to ask the question too, and also the complement of that is, why do we stop at Florida Vista?
Yeah.
I was anticipating Alondra.
Well, why stop there? Let's go to Foster. I mean,
no.
This
Alondra.
was my fault. I pushed the city, the Jim and Beth, and to really think about, let's focus on a limited area first, figure out what we're going to do there, and then you can replicate this in as many different parts of the city as you want.
Yep, that's what I mentioned.
I don't see this going past north of Alondra.
No.
Honestly.
No.
The question
I agree.
is,
Yeah.
why don't we just go all the way to Alondra?
I do see some of this on Artesia Boulevard. Frankly, there are actually areas of Rosecrans I could see this working on as well, and of course Bellflower. And then we may, it may even expand further. But I mean, the primary application, of course, is the downtown. But 100% right, it can be used, and I think it will be used on other corridors as we go forward. Again, we're dreaming big. We're hoping it is wildly successful.
Yeah, make it bigger. Go to Alondra and go to Rose.
Well, not too quickly, guys. Let's.
Well, I don't think it's a big stretch, though.
Yeah,
going
I
to
don't.
Rose and going to Alondra, it's not a big stretch.
We can do Alondra. I mean, if your goal is, obviously, we have the two shopping centers there with the new uses in it, which is sort of different than what we're doing here. But if you're looking at trying to do something on the other side of the street, the trailer parks and stuff, I get it.
Right.
I'm fine.
And then the side of the west side, south of Aldi.
Yeah.
Florvis and Aldi. It's a very small portion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen there, but I think we can certainly expand it to Alondra without much problem. But
just as we're looking at businesses, small businesses that are scalable, these artisanal manufacturers that are looking to scale up, we can do the same thing once we get this down. I think Alana is saying, let's not bite off too much more than we can chew at first. Let's get it going and get it nailed down, know what we're doing, and then we can scale it, as Jeff mentioned, to other parts of the city.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you guys are spot on. I've heard it a couple times today. This is applicable in multiple parts of the town. But frankly, I think the first part to start, as we always have, is the downtown. And what's happened is what we're learning is what works for Bellflower also works on portions of Artesia. And I think that's going to continue on as well. So,
right. Well, I totally agree with that. But my only point is, by extending it to Alanda, it's not a lot of possibilities anymore anyway.
Ah, you already won that one, Sonny. We're gonna do it. I think
Yeah,
it's
we
Also
pulled it,
going to
yeah.
Rose. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's a clean break, so to speak.
So it sounds like Jim mentioned that it is going to Rose. That Cedar was a typo.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a boundary.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, it's clear. We'll to make it very clear, we'll run it from Alondra South to the South City boundary. It's
Yeah,
actually just
okay.
beyond Rose, so we'll be all
Yeah.
right on that. There are a couple areas there that may benefit, so we'll be all right.
Mhm. I don't think it's gonna be a lot more work by adding those areas anyway.
It won't.
Yeah, okay.
It'll be fine.
All right, so in terms of timeline, I was really impressed with the timeline that Ilana mentioned about sometime in March.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's funny because I mentioned to you, and it's not germane to this meeting, but I'm going to write a note to the council about the workload on planning, because I am concerned about the planning. We're stretching that department pretty hard right now. So we're going to shuffle a couple projects back, and this one is actually number 1 or 2 of the priorities. So we're going to leave this one toward the front end and give them time to do some of the rest of the stuff. And I'll get some to you guys the next couple of days on that. I don't
right.
want Jeff to die on the job here.
No.
Thank you.
All right, any other question, Councilmember Hamada, Councilmember Sanchez?
Planners are tough.
Yeah,
Good people.
Are they tough or they're tough?
they're tough.
It works both ways, I know.
Do you need a motion from us, Councilmember Santinez, or?
No, I think just a general
I
direction,
think it's a
guys.
kind of a general direction. I think it's clear to them already what we
Okay.
wanted, right?
Perfect.
We will need some specific votes and specific motions later on. We start implementing the tools of this thing and how to get there. But right now, I think just general consensus, and I'm reading that, and I think it's there.
I'm looking forward to seeing what our constituents and stakeholders have to say. So,
yeah.
So when do you plan on having this stakeholder meeting?
We're going to start them in, I think, about 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's giving us
February.
some time to get the invites out and so forth. So we were just waiting for this meeting before we sent the invites out, and they'll go out later today and tomorrow. We have
And
the
you-
dates set.
Jim, you're going to do these by Zoom, I presume?
You presume correctly.
Okay. All right. I mean, there's a part of me that thinks we should wait till COVID, but that could be July before we get the ability to meet. So I don't want to wait that long. Yeah.
We
Yeah,
might
but
get
I
a little
think
bit
you can
more
get a lot of input
participation
by
from
Zoom
people
meeting.
who can't make it out of their business or
Yeah.
something of that nature. So we might foster some more participation than we normally would.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
I got you.
Okay.
one more,
Anything else you need from us?
Councilmember Santinez, actually,
Yeah,
one
go
more
ahead.
asset for Ms. Cruz that I was thinking here is our community events. We have a lot of great community events, and our park director can really talk about them throughout the year. So we do street fest, and we do movie nights and things of that nature, all in the heart of the downtown.
Yeah, I think she's aware of that, and actually
Okay,
recommending
good.
that we may tailor some of that different activities to help coordinate with these kinds of uses,
Perfect.
which is noted and probably wise. So we'll do
Got
that.
it. Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
I'll sip up.
Okay, any final thoughts? So we're good?
We're good.
Good.
Okay, so direction is very clear.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time on this Thursday morning. Alana, I appreciate your time on this Thursday afternoon. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, everyone.
I
So
think it
thank
was-
you all for attending
Thank
this
you.
meeting, and this meeting is now adjourned at 11:43. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.